Welcome to Technologies Now. This is episode 5 in our series here. I have Stephanie Anson with Anson Properties talking with us today. This episode is going to be named A Broker's Perspective. We have a broker here in front of us. And Stephanie, why don't we start with just an introduction of yourself and where you do business and this sort of thing, and then we'll get into some more details about your background, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like you said, my name is Stephanie Anson. I've been in the real estate industry for about 21 years. I've owned my own brokerage since 2011. I've primarily focused in the North Central Florida region. And a very interesting ride because obviously I started in real estate when Florida went through that big boom, then the big crash, and then all of the different cycles, thereafter. So it's been fun in Florida, as real estate. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of changes that come both legal, policy, procedures that have affected our market as well. Prior to real estate, I was a IT engineer. I started off my career in the Navy. I handled classified systems at a joint warfare college, carried my clearance over into the private sector, worked for a defense contractor for a long time, still servicing military bases and hospitals and attorneys, law firms, that kind of thing, and got burnt out. And one day I woke up and I'm like, I do not want to do this anymore. I'm working 80 hours a week. What can I do that I can control my schedule? Which is the big misnomer in real estate. You never control your schedule. So I said, I don't want to work 80-hour weeks anymore. And I jump right in and I'm right back into it, right? So you got to find that work-life balance in anything that you do. And I'm driven and ambitious. So the problem is I got to learn how to say no to myself. So that's kind of been the biggest, issue I've had with, being in any industry actually. But it's been interesting. So I've enjoyed it. A lot of changes are coming down the road, I'm pretty sure, with, everything that's transpired in the industry in the last couple years. And I don't think anybody knows where home is or where their feet are going to land because those changes are just coming fast and quick, and it's from all different areas. You have it in the industry itself, and then you have outside of the industry that impacts the industry that we don't have any control over. And so, it keeps everybody on their toes, I gotta tell you that.
Oh yeah, no question about it. That is interesting. So how did your background, in IT and the Navy in particular, how did that prepare you for what you're doing now, or did it?
No, it actually did. So what was really fascinating is at the time that I had gotten out of IT and then into real estate, of course I was with a builder for a while. I was in sales, and then I was promoted to a regional manager over the Orlando territory. So I had a lot of communities that I was managing. I was managing inside sales, outside sales, and I wore the performance coach hat, which meant any new person in real estate spent 30 days with me and were trained, right? So I'm actually doing 3 positions at one time, for a little while because the market was just changing so fast. The builders were trying to catch their feet. Sales were going down. You're trying to hire at the same time, keep your in-house sales or outside sales. And so I kind of just wore multiple hats. And what was interesting about that, by the time I had left the builder and went out on my own, which was interesting because it was right after the market crash. And when that took place, we had all that big money that came into Florida. And so they sought us out, any of us that were in positions that knew the contractors for commercial, or not commercial, but, from the new home builds. They wanted to hire them internal, right? So you had the BlackRock people that came in, Blackstone people that came in, all of their money that flooded into Florida, and they were buying it in major areas. And so I sat in the round tables with them. Was very interesting at the time. I know more than I, now obviously than I knew then. So I look at what they were doing back then a lot different now than I did at the time. So their primary goal when they first came into the market after our crash was they wanted to wrap up all of that inventory, right? We were going through that foreclosure crisis. They wanted our construction teams. They definitely were focusing on a lot of the new home build communities because people that were going in foreclosure off stated income and all of that, a lot of them bought in those new home communities. Right. So they were ripe. And not only that, but in Orlando area and some of the other markets in Florida, we also had a lot of foreign buyers. So we weren't just the only ones affected. You had a lot of people coming out of Europe that got hit pretty hard with that crash. And so their goal was to come in and wrap up market share. So if they wrapped up market share, they could control pricing, right? Not just on the demand for the real estate itself, but also in the rental. So this is what happened. So we sit in a round table. They had a 15-year goal. It was to buy up as much market share as they could. They would go in, offer, close in 7 days, no inspections, because we would do all the numbers on paper. Us as the brokers would do the numbers on paper. If they worked, they'd send the team out, construction team. They would evaluate the home, because in time, during the foreclosure crisis, people were stripping copper. They were stripping cabinets. They were, so you have to make sure the house is still intact, right? So they go in. Yeah, they go in, they do the evaluation, they come back, and if the numbers still work, they work. So then they do the offer, close in 7 days cash. No buyer could compete at the time. So they're building their inventory up, putting it into a real estate investment trust. Their goal was to turn around and sell that trust, right? Sell all that entire portfolio 10 to 15 years. Now, by controlling market share in all these major markets, they can now control rental rates. So the goal was, when we are in the 2 and 3% range, if we control rental rates and drive those rates up, it's going to push people out into the market and they're going to buy. And if they buy, it's going to artificially raise the demand on the pricing of the homes, right? So now we have a complete cycle. So if you actually start back to when they did subprime, and they came in with all these subprime loans and stated income and just tell us what you want. To me, looking back 20 years later, that's a wealth drain. That was a complete cycle that was fabricated from the time that the mortgage just came out to the fact that the same money came in to buy up everything that fell apart, put it into a trust, decided to create the rental scheme where it forced the rental rates up, in turn forced people out to buy, increased the demand on housing prices, and guess who owns all the property? Yeah, so they have market share. And so in a lot of those major areas, now that fast forward there's a bill sitting in Congress right now to address that. All the hedge funds and multi-international companies that have all of these single family properties that are not multifamily, that bill's directed towards them, if it passes, to be forced to sell within a certain period of time. And if they're forced to sell within that period of time, then, and they're giving them 2 years at this point, unless, amendments are made to the bill. Right. What is that going to do to the pricing in Florida? Now you have a market share owned by these conglomerates that are now going to be forced to sell. And what are you going to see happen with pricing, right? You're going to get a dump. So you have some of them that are aware of this bill, and you're starting to see in some areas along the coast that these homes are kind of going up for sale now. So that kind of puts us in a really mixed market, because you've got those of us that are aware that stuff's sitting out there. You've got agents that are just they just join, I want to do real estate. They don't really see the bigger picture. And then you have all the outside influences that are taking place right now with the banking regulations and ISO 20022, Basel III, what's being pushed with crypto. You also have what's going on with crypto to buy, invest in real estate. So they're making moves there. So there's so many changing factors. And at the same time, as in the industry, as agents and brokers, we're looking at how are we going to be impacted with all these lawsuits? Because you've got all these changes going on over here. You have all these market dynamics going on. You have outside influences that should have never been there, that got away with stuff they shouldn't have gotten away with. Put us in the market we're in. And then you've got all these financial factors too, right? So I always, when it comes to buying and selling, I'm always about the person where they're at right now. Okay, do you need to buy and sell? Is it a great, financial decision for you? Because we just went through, and I know you and I joked about it a little bit, we just went through a period where people are now kind of struggling because the last couple of years they were told to date the rate and buy the house, right? And now they're going, I dated that rate and I'm still in it, and we haven't, the mortgages, the interest rates haven't come down enough for me to refinance for it to make sense, And so you're starting to see a little bit of that happening too. So it's been really interesting. I always come at it from the side of, when you're working with a consumer, it really should be what's in their best interest, and also looking at it long term and not just now, and giving them all sides of that. And if they're going to make drastic choices like, oh, I can't afford it long term, but I can for a couple years. Well, if you can't afford it long term, is that really the smartest thing? Because guess how we got into the market the last time? People making poor decisions based upon being told you can do this now and you can just figure it out later. Well, that's not going to work. And so there's accountability across the board with that comes on both the sides of the agents, the brokers, and then the consumer themselves, buyer beware, which I do believe we have a smarter consumer than we used to because everything's online.
Everything's available. Any research you want to do is absolutely out there. Except maybe understanding the insights of the fixed supply and demand, in the market. I don't know if that shows up as readily as you would hope for the consumer to educate themselves. Which I suppose is where you come in, right? I mean, a broker that's doing a good job and doing, what you said should be in their best interest, which is a great soundbite, by the way, because that is how you should approach it, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you've got people that come at, so it's sales, right? So when you come down to it, it's sales, and people have a sales background from all different angles. And there's all kinds of different sales training. And then, of course, it's really, that communication and relationship one-to-one with somebody. So some people you have out there that are agents that are just all sales. They're worried about the bottom line, how many numbers are they going to make. And there's others that are out there really concerned about their client, what they're going through. And they know that if they do that, they build that business off that, they're going to have a ton of referral business. Because if someone says absolutely 100% you need to trust that person, they are looking out for me, you're going to earn that business long term in a lot more ways than if you're just worried about the numbers, on your personal sales. So it's interesting to get feedback from consumers, when I'm talking to them or if they had a bad experience with an agent. But I think transparency is extremely important in any sales industry, actually, because most people's complaints come from lack of understanding and lack of transparency.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And so that being said, where does most of your business come from? I mean, it sounds like you probably have built a good referral business because you're doing the right thing for your clients. I would bet on that. But how do you get by year to year, with enough business? What's the secret there?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So back to the IT. So when I did leave the builder and went out on my own, I worked with a friend of mine, she owned her own brokerage, and we kind of started getting off the ground a little bit before I branched off on my own. And at that point in time, online leads were really becoming something that was just starting. And for me, no fear. I mean, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm like, oh boy,
Right.
I'm thinking SEO, I'm going, and at the same time, that's also when agents were blogging a lot, right? So they're trying to get ranked and found that way because there weren't a lot of lead companies, and some of the lead companies that were out there were just kind of up and coming when it was really driving online leads, not referral companies and that kind of thing. So I just took right to it. To me, it made sense. And not only that, but being the performance coach and sales trainer over agents, all we talked about was treating leads like gold. What were their hot buttons? How do you overcome their objections? What makes sense? And is it something they really want versus what they really need? And you go through all of that, and it just made sense because I said, well, I can do that face to face. I can convert that right into language that I can put into an email, and texting wasn't that big, at that time as far as the online leads go and the CRMs where it is today. However, that was right up my alley. So I jumped all over that. So I actually grew my business, the main component of my business, on online leads before anybody else was even touching it. Or, when things are new, people make fun of it. So in the industry, people were like, oh, you're going to do, and I'm thinking, well,
oh my gosh,
you don't know the power behind it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, the leverage and the, opportunity. I mean, it's gold. You said treat them like gold. Even the online leads, you have to treat like gold for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have people, so what's really interesting when it comes to lead conversion, because that's another thing in the industry that's really misconstrued with agents, is they'll hop brokerages or they're going to go wherever and they're like, oh, the leads suck. And I'm like, they don't, because here's the deal. You're not finding them where they're at their point in time frame of buying. You're at your point in time frame. You want it now. They're not ready now. So how are they going to pick you 2 to 3 years down the road? You've already paid for the lead, right? If it's online, you've already paid for it. So you're just going to let that stuff go. You're just going to go, they're not ready now, so I'm going to ignore it and just move on, which the majority do. And I'll teach this, and I know, because people are like, why do you tell everybody what you do? Because most people don't do it. I'll tell them till I'm blue in the face, and it's not going to matter. They're not competition for me. They're not going to do what I do. So I don't have any problem sharing it. And actually, I do hope, because if they do what I do, then we're going to have better agents out there. We're going to have better business out there. right? So I don't mind it. So if, I'm providing information about what I'm doing. So when it comes back to that, I have people that pop off 5, 6, 7 years later in my database, and I just stay in front of them. I have no idea. I do know what's in front of them because I'm building out the campaigns, but there's so much data. I don't know what it was that triggered them until I go back and look, Oh, I've been watching your stuff for years. I always laugh at that. I'm like, what all have you seen? I'm like, what is it that you're watching,
I would love to feedback on that directly, right? Yes.
Yeah, so I think that stuff's really important, and you just don't see it happen.
So we were talking about lead conversion. So what do you do? And let me jump into technology. I got to ask you about this because you obviously understand technology more than most, which is fantastic. So what is the key to your use of technology that gives you your advantages to nurture your leads and convert and just, stay in touch, or even beyond that? I don't know if it's part of the process once you're under contract. I know a lot of title companies have some of their own software, and not all that's come together yet from what I've seen, but it's getting closer. What's your take on this?
Automation's huge. But the point, so people get lost in automation because automation should be there enough to assist, but not fully take over, because that's when you lose the relationship. Real estate is a trust factor. It has to be a one-on-one relationship. So if you over automate, the problem that you're going to have is that communication with that client is not going to be as smooth as it needs to be, or you're going to lose them in translation because there is no relationship there, right? And they pick up on the fact that they're being automated too. It should be light touches, and a little bit of inconsistencies that are natural human behavior, right? But if it's constant, 8 o'clock every morning, I'm getting a text, and it's, these things, people pick up on that. Yeah, they pick up on that.
Yes, people are
so. But I think just fine tuning that and understanding that behavioral relationship is key. And most people, IT is just hard for them to begin with. And now you're talking about, I got to figure out IT and then someone's behavior and reaction to it and what that means, For me, that's natural. I know it's not there for everybody, but it's not something that it's hard to pick up on either once you start seeing trends. And then you can make modifications to whatever it is you're working with the client. So for instance, let's just say I have someone new that's in, they gave me some perception that they're ready to buy within the next 30, 45 days. And so I might put them on automation that says, okay, so here's your process of what you're going to go through. Here's, here's the title information. Here's, what you're going to go through and expenses on buying the house. Here's what to expect. Here's the pros, the cons, the downfalls. So they'll get an automation of a home journey process that I'll drop them into. And then I follow up on conversation like, hey, did you get the email that explained, do you have any questions about that information? And I do that a lot too when we meet in person. We'll go over everything that's been sent to them as well. Because sometimes, they're like busy and they're like, I don't know. And then they thought about it. We meet and they're like, yes, I have 20 questions. And so, but that's where you can use automation to help, but it's not overkill. Yes. Right. That's an educational portion of it. The other is not overdoing it on your initial contacts that come in, keeping it simple, like, hey, you were referred to me by so-and-so, do you have a moment to talk? Leave it. Yes, still make your phone call. Right. Yes. And still make your phone call. And so the biggest problem I see, and I try to teach my agents this all the time, and I notice in it, the reports don't lie. I can pull reports and see what you're doing on conversion. I can see where you're failing. Are you failing at the phone call? Are you failing, where's your failure point? So I can use that in my technology to kind of help train agents to pinpoint their failure purpose or the points of failure. But I can say the biggest thing I always say, you don't know your clients, how they like to communicate. We understand that the younger generations love impersonal. They want to text. They don't want to talk to you on the phone. They don't care to see you in person. It's very impersonal. The older generations are annoyed if you're not calling them. You're like, why are you texting me? This is so hard for me to see. And they're like, their glasses, I can't read. And so, but people, they forget about those things. And so you got to understand your client. And so I always say, listen, if they don't pick up the phone, because we're spammed with phone calls to death, if they don't pick up the phone, immediately text them and say, I just called you, left a message, it's me, here's my contact information, save it in your phone, whatever it is that your point of text is, and also send an email. So I'll get, I'll review with an agent and I'll say, what happened here? These people seemed like they're very interested, but I texted them and because they wanted an appointment. And she goes, they didn't respond to text. Well, did you call? Mm-mm. Did you email? Mm-mm. So then I'm like, well, you need to do that. So every point of contact should always follow up with the other two that you didn't, if you didn't reach them with the one, you always do the other two every single time. Because until you learn their point of contact or how they like to communicate, and then you can clarify that with them and figure out how you guys want to move forward. So, but, there's been deals that have been lost over that. Or I'll pick up the phone and I do what's called client care calls behind the agents.
Right.
And just do a check-in, and they're like, oh, well, we communicated, I sent the other day and never heard back, and I'll go in, I'm like, well, I don't use my phone for that.
Right.
Okay, going back to my point of, you make the phone call, you have to find out where they communicate, and they're like, oh, that's a dead lead. No, it's not. I converted them for your appointment's on Tuesday.
Exactly.
And if you need another date and time, you need to give them a call right now and figure that out. But as of right now, you're on Tuesday. So, because I do get commonly asked, how do you convert all the time? Because I'm not lazy. There's a point, and I'm not scared of the phone. Those are a lot of things that people have to overcome. But really, it's understanding the points of contact and how to follow up with leads and not thinking every lead. So I'll tell everybody this. If you're trying to sell me something, I'm your worst nightmare because I put myself last on everything. My clients come first, my family comes first. And even though we're not supposed to do that, I really am one of those people that I'm always doing for others, right? So if you're trying to sell me something, I'll tell you, I don't have time for you today. Please don't give up on me. I want what you have. You're going to have to get me at a good point, and I can't guarantee when that is. I'm on the road driving. I can't look at my calendar. You know what I mean? And so I do. They'll call and call and call, and I'm like, I know it's your third time calling. I still can't, you caught me on the road once again. I still can't commit. You got I promise you'll get me. And so that's because I run 100 miles an hour and I still work 80 hours a week, and I will put everybody else first before myself. So, but I'm a prime example of what I teach my agents. Don't do that because you might have me on the other end that needs you. I just can't get to you when you're ready.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So that is your process. What's the resistance with the agents? Is it just they don't realize? Are they scared? Are they... how do you get them over the hump on this? It's
experience. So once they see it, it's right, tactile. It embeds. They learn, right? Sometimes they just think a lot of times they know better. I came from sales and we did this and we had that. And I'm like, well, those are old bad habits, right? Oh, wow. However, there's a reason my conversion is where it's at compared to where yours is. And I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to give you what you need to be successful. And it's up to them at that point. I'm all about giving access to the tools and the tools themselves, but you've got to be able to walk the walk. And if you don't, you're going to work yourself out of the business. And that's why they say it's a 90-10 business.
Yes. Describe that for the listeners, if you don't mind. A 90-10 business.
So, yes. So only 10% of those that are in the business do 90% of the work and have 90% of the business because the rest either, the upfront cost to real estate is too much for them. They're not prepared. They cycle through all of their friends and don't know how to run a business. And so they don't have the marketing or the business end of it. They're not able to succeed there. Their expectation of what it would be is wrong, right? Their expectation wasn't set properly. Or they get in on a hot market and they think it's easy. So they'll ride that market for the first 1 or 2 years as it's going good. And the moment it shifts, they can't survive. Because they didn't learn how to run a business. They learned how to process leads and run out the door and go handle that, but they never took care of marketing after the fact, initial follow-up. They never built upon the business that they did. And so then you find them jumping brokerages, trying to find leads, those things, and then they've never set them up on the internet. So the power of the internet's huge. I actually, and this is something that's odd that a lot of people don't do, but I hired VAs to go on every directory and put my information every place that they could find to put me. I mean, that's just because I understand algorithms and, web crawling and credibility and all those things. But that's what's really helped me, not with just the online leads, with whatever partnerships I have, but also because I'm out there.
you show up because you are in several sites, and obviously the algorithms, the SEO loves that, right? And you're obviously very active. So yeah, and it seems like you're jumping into real estate in a hot market. It would be such a godsend to have the ability to launch into those other years if you do it right. But if you're just collecting your money, you're going to miss out on the opportunities into the future. That's a very
Right.
good point. So, thinking of the future, so next 5 to 10 years, I'm going to ask you specifically about what you think the real estate, not the real estate, this isn't the real estate market trend. We can get to that for sure. I'm sure you have opinions on where things are going to go. But first, from like a technology standpoint, you and your agents, how is technology going to help support? Is AI going to play an increasing role, or what role will it take from here?
AI actually already does play a role. So you have software that's coming out right now for closings and transaction management that has an AI component in it, which obviously can set up some automation and make that admin work less, especially for agents that don't hire transaction managers. Maybe they don't do enough business, and some people just don't want to. They just personally enjoy being over every aspect of the transaction. Then you've got the AI component that helps with conversion. So that's going to be in your CRMs or third party that you can use APIs for integration into maybe proprietary programs. And so that is where people are starting to learn how to actually utilize that type of AI in technology, because again, it goes back to where I stated you have to understand the relationship piece with the consumer and when to break that AI component off and step in so you don't lose them because they just feel like they're another number at that point, right? So the moment I get a phone call, case in point, the moment I get a phone call and I answer it and I hear beep, I'm hanging up. I know right then and there I got somebody that has a dialer going on with 15 people waiting for the first one to pick up, and they're going to try and just sell me something. And most of the time it's a company trying to sell me leads, and I'm like, I'm not interested. And it's a waste of my time because I really filter about 15 plus calls a day like that. And if I were to take all those calls or spend my time on those calls, they can turn into a 20, 30-minute conversation each time. I don't have time for that. And so I am bombarded with them. But if I'm bombarded with it and someone's putting their information out there on the internet, right, and they're looking for a house or they're looking to sell their house, they're bombarded. So usually this is how I win them over on the phone, because I know when I make a phone call and I got an online lead.
And you're going to share this. You're going to share this with everybody. Okay.
Of course, because well, let's see who does it. I put, they'll get their information out there. So when I make a phone call from an online lead, I always laugh when they answer the phone, and I always let them know. I said, listen, I have your information. You may or may not be interested, and I'm pretty sure you're bombarded with phone calls. And they go, yes. Is this about a house and real estate? And I'm like, it is. And if you're not interested, I'm really sorry for being one of the ones that call you as well. But if you are, I'd love to talk to you for a little bit. But what I did when I did that was I related to them. I brought that no down. I let them know it's cool to air your frustration with me. I get it. I laugh a little bit to kind of lighten the mood. So they go, oh, you're so right, And then I kind of go into it, and then I educate them, and I'm like, well, listen, let me help you out with that, and when you do these things, right, and right then and there, because I didn't go straight into a sale, I didn't go straight into trying to get them to use me, I educated them on how to use the internet and how to keep their information safe. They're like, they want to talk to me more. And then it just goes into, now, and sometimes they really are interested in real estate, they just appreciated that, and I'm like, you know what, how about this? I know you're not looking to make a move right now. You could be even 10 years out. But we all know in real estate that the market constantly shifts. And at some point, we always have a question. Maybe it's not for us, but it could be for somebody in our family or a friend or whatever. And sometimes we want reliable information to rely on. So would you like for me to go ahead and set you up on one of those reports? You get it monthly or you can get it quarterly. You have the control to change it. But however, you may not look at it for 6 months, but when you're ready, it's going to be there for you. Would you like that? It's impersonal, and I'm so easy to talk to. Even if it's just a real estate question that you do not want my services whatsoever, you just want to pick my brain, pick up the phone and call me. I'm one of the easiest people to talk to. Mine. They're mine.
That is really good. Mm-hmm. We could clone you. I think.
but I do care. So when I'm actually having that conversation, it's not because I know what I'm going to say is going to have them gravitate towards me, and I don't get every single one of them. But it does allow them to understand I'm human. I'm here. I really do care about people and people getting good information. So if you just need to bounce a question off me, call me. I'll answer the question. It's not a big deal to me. I'd rather you get a good answer or give you direction where to go than have you on the other end that can't stand every agent out there. We're all, whatever, because you had bad advice or a bad experience. I'd rather just give you that information and let you run with it.
Well, it's value add. That approach, I can see how that would work. If I was on the phone with you, I'd be very interested in the fact that you approached it this way, and first of all, you made them feel at ease at first, and when you answer the phone and it's solicitation, everyone's tight and defensive.
Mm-hmm.
You took down the walls, and then you gave them some value. That's brilliant. So the personal touch, I feel like, is always going to be there, but is technology going to replace, a lot of the agents, personal touches, their action into the future? Is AI going to develop far enough that it's going to help or hinder, the real estate agent?
It could be. For me, this is a really deep question because I have a macro perspective on a different level than most people. A lot of that comes with my background in IT, looking at where things are going, and I also watch a lot of laws. I'm one of those that reads a 5,000-page bill because I like source information. So I will take my time to do that. And I know a lot of people don't, but it also is why I kind of know what's going on in the changes in the industry. And when I sit down with my sellers, I have an honest conversation with them about what's going on out there. And if you get caught in that cycle, what does that mean to you? Make the decision for today, So that's always been very important. But when it comes to the IT factor and the role it's going to play with agents, yes, a lot of automation is going to take place. But what I'm also seeing with the changes in the finance and what you're looking at with the regulations on different countries of what they're implementing for trade, what currency they've agreed to use for trade, all of these things are kind of changing in the background. And when you have instant access, and then of course you got the state of Florida's talking about, let's get rid of taxes. There's a lot more going on with these laws and constitutional property rights that a lot of people really don't understand. There's been a lot of overlay with regulation. So you've got law, then you have policies and procedures, right? You have administrative courts, and then you have Article 1 and you have Article 3, okay? This is something that we've gotten away from in the last 100 years because of the way the system's set up and has been set up in government. We're relying so much on policies, procedures, and statutes versus what the actual law is. And so what I'm seeing change is that they're being pushed back on statutes and those things because it's not law, right? You're having bureaucracy create whatever, but it's violating laws, which is why you're seeing all these lawsuits out there. So this is kind of going on in the background. It is going to impact real estate. Then on the other side of that, you're seeing all this transparency about how compensation is provided to agents and how that transparency is with the consumer. Those lawsuits took place. We're having more that are coming out, or at least the talk of them, right, being there. And then you've got the other changes that are with the ISO 20022 and Basel III, and how banking is impacted, and how mortgages are going to be impacted, and how those documents read, which is, I won't get into that here because that's really deep, but that's all going to have a shift on the industry too. So in my thought process, looking at a macro level on how the industry is going to change, well, I think it's going to be easier for a consumer to buy and sell property, less need for some of the things that are currently there that are administrative. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Do I believe that the transactions are going to become faster on a more one-to-one peer, ability to transfer the sales? Yes. And I also feel like you're going to see some of that kind of lean towards how you sell a car, with a title. I mean, obviously with the home, it's a little bit more intricate, but there is going to be some changes, and I think some of that's going to be readily available once everything that's going on in the background right now settles down. And I don't think anybody has the answer to it, really.
Yeah, and what what's the timeline you see on some of this shaking out? I mean, are we talking inevitable or 5 years?
It's more long term. Well, because we have to understand the behavior of people too in a shift, right? So you have a learning curve. You have companies that are involved with, adopting those changes. So none of that's going to happen overnight because we're so intertwined in so many different industries that all have impact on one that there's no way that's going to be an overnight change. That's definitely going to be long term and adopted. And through that adoption, we're going to work out the kinks, right? What works, what doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving to AI specifically, do you feel like AI, and you probably have more insight than many, you're more educated than most, clearly, and you're curious about how things work and where they're going to go. So is AI going to be something that's going to be good for humanity? Think maybe not 5 to 10 years, maybe 50 years. What's your forecast if you care to share that with me?
I would say that depends on how we embrace it, because already studies are coming out showing the brain patterns of those that are focusing on AI to where the thought patterns don't kick in the brain, and they're starting to lack reasoning and the ability to problem solve. So that's already being shown in the brain on reports that are taking place with AI. So I expect, as that knowledge with how the brain's impacted on AI, we're going to see forced changes, just because no one's going to accept degradation of health, right? And no one's going to accept the impact of becoming basically a brain drone because your brain's not fully functioning and thinking as it should, because you're not using your reasoning skills and all those other things. You're relying on a component to tell you. And not only that, but AI is, imperfect. So you can test the different, like Grok against ChatGPT, and you're going to get different things that come up. And then you also see political bias in AI. You see bias of the programmer or bias of the agenda on the development, right? And that's not autonomous. It's just people seem to think that these things are just, it searches the internet. Yeah, but it can have influence. Anything can have influence. And so that's why I've always been a source doc person. I always say, if you haven't looked at it yourself, if you have not read it yourself, then how do you know what you were just told is the truth, right? So, but I've been that way my whole life. And I mean, even in my own household, I have to kind of, hello, where is that coming from? I try to, and they get mad at me. What do you mean? I'm like, well, if you can't show me, then how do you know that's the truth? Because I want to see the source documents, because what I've found, especially being in the military, what I've found is marketing words are beautiful, and they can lead you in a direction to perceive something different from what the true meaning is. And if you don't sit down and either reread or source that information, right, you're going down the path that they want you to, right? And it's the same thing that you see in sales when people use different techniques. They don't have the transparency, or why these lawsuits come up. Well, if I would have known that, I would have made a different decision. So there's no transparency there, and they knew that. So this wouldn't have happened if that was the case. So, and that's what we're seeing a lot in these lawsuits in the real estate industry, is because of that right there. So I don't know. We'll see. I think the AI component is new for a lot of people, and we're going to have to see how that plays out. I think it could be very helpful, but we're going to have to control it. It can't be something that just, and then I can also see where maybe there's a certain component too with children, in different age groups as the brain develops. Because if we're lacking development because on that reliance, what are we going to be producing out there as adults?
Oh my gosh, yes. What are we going to turn into the future? We're going to devolve. Is that a word? I don't know. The opposite of evolve.
Right?
See that? Yes, it's scary. It's scary. Your perspective is really interesting on that. Let's get back to real estate real quick, and then we'll probably wrap up in a minute here. So, real estate market, your perspective, residential real estate, Florida, nationwide. Where do you think things are going to go here in the next year, 2 years, whatever perspective you have on this?
Florida itself is transient, right? So even if we have what we call a bad market, it's still a good market, right? So prior to COVID, our average, we were running for 5 months of inventory. We're kind of back to that right now.
Yeah.
What we're seeing really here, in our market, and everyone says it's strange, and it is, because, there's different factors that are affecting a purchase or so much a sale. So you've got homeowners that are like, I'm at a 2% interest rate. I'm not selling, even though I probably need to, or I want to downsize, or et cetera, because I'm not giving up this interest rate. So I'll just sit here because I'm not going to get the kind of house that I need, to do what I need to do. Then you've got others that are sitting on a ton of equity, and they're like, I got equity. It doesn't matter. I'm relocating. Then you've got those that got in, during COVID time frame, right? So they saw this price escalation, and now all of a sudden they got a job relocation or something, and they might not even break even on the house. Or if we've, gone through some price decreasing, which we've stabilized in our market, then they might have paid been one of them that paid $75,000 over, when we had the bidding wars, which I thought was just, that's one I couldn't swallow. I could never give it. I mean, that is your decision to make. But I have seen when the market, goes under or goes backwards or reverses or whatever, and what that does to people. So in good conscience, you want the home, that's a decision you have to be okay with, and if that's where you want to go and compete, absolutely, I'll help you win it, but you need to understand that if the market, are you going to be okay with that, and I know a lot of people didn't take the time. They're like, oh, this is crazy. We're just hand over fist, and that's where you get the division between agents that are really looking out for the consumer and what's smart business practices and what are smart purchasing, and then those that are all about just gobbling up whatever they can. It was a stressful time period for all involved. I mean, agents and, the consumer alike. It was not an easy time frame. A lot of confusion, right? Same thing for now. So the future, for Florida, with it being so transient, if they get rid of the taxes,
oh my God.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going, is DeSantis watching the same bill I am? Are they going to try and push through that tax thing if they pass that bill and it happens at once and we just kind of work out that stabilization in our market? My mind's always going in different directions like that. I mean, I have no proof that that's where he, why he's doing it, but I think about those things. I go, well, timing would be interesting on that one, wouldn't it? Yeah. But we've got a pretty healthy market overall. We've got pockets that aren't doing good in Florida, for various reasons that are usually outside factors. We got a condo issue if they're on the beaches, and inspections and building problems. So that's one thing that impacts, pricing. You've got buyers that do not want to spend, they're going, okay, I'm going to go buy, my affordability is X, we're going to go out there, we're looking, but I'm not going to go buy a house that I've got to renovate at a high interest rate and then pour more money into it. And oh, by the way, taxes are also higher in this county. And oh, by the way, we have one of the highest electric rates in the state too. So in the city of Gainesville. So you add that on there. And then you add the insurance problems that we're having. So we have an affordability issue, 100%. Okay. So if your home needs those kinds of updates, right, and it's not priced where someone can go, I have a budget here I can put into that house to make the price make sense for me to purchase it, it's not selling. Or it is, but there's a lot of negotiation, price drops, and things like that. Mm-hmm. Sellers are reluctant to believe it because they're like, oh, interest rates are going to come down anytime and the market's going to explode. Well, that's not necessarily true. And we've been waiting for how long for them to come down? Because let me remind you, date the rate, marry the house was 2021. We haven't moved, and so, a little, but, it's still a problem. So really it's just having things make sense. And it's a lot of micro markets, overall Florida's great. Micro markets can be a little bit different. Some are really good, some are booming, some have slowed down a lot, some are not moving at all, Across the nation, the biggest complaint that I see is that people's listings are sitting until they expire, and then the sellers are just not wanting to put them back on the market. Right. It's just frustrating. And you can only price decrease so much because then it's not really a pricing issue at that point, right? Because you're not, unless you really have to get out of the house and fire sale it, but then it's really what's going on out there, and can you stay in the home? Yeah, and is this the market for you to sell in? And if you can, you can wait it out. And so I have those honest discussions, which, you hear some brokers, no, if they're right, they want to list it. I'm like, If I'm looking at the paperwork and I'm seeing financially this is going to hurt them, or I'm going to tell them that information and let them decide. I'm not going to try and get so and you've got a lot of that out there too, where people get listed, or it wasn't the best decision for them.
Right, that makes sense. Well, on a closing note here, Stephanie, let me ask you, what advice would you give to a new business owner and or new real estate agent?
Business owner, setting up your infrastructure is going to be key. You can't run and do what you need to do without your infrastructure there and understanding how your business is going to run, because now you're putting too many things in the air. Same thing with an agent. I mean, if it's a new person coming into real estate, I get it. You want to hurry up and get that first client. And if you can, great. Okay. But sit down and get all of your systems set up and all your processes, because if you do hit it really well and you take off and you don't have that in place, your business is not, and that market changes, your business is not going to be a business any longer. Right. So I always believe that foundational principles is setting up your infrastructure, and from there you're able to grow.
Excellent. Excellent. With that, I want to thank you, Stephanie Anson, for joining us on Technologies Now. We definitely appreciate it. And we wish you the best in whatever market comes up. You'll obviously be ready for it.
Yeah, thank you. It's very nice to be on.
Yeah, absolutely.